If you go to neopets.com right now, it works. The pets are there, the games load. People are arguing about item prices on the message boards, which is a little strange because the site went up in 1999. It was built for children, and for most of the last 15 years, it's been quietly falling apart. It's been sold 4 times. In 2022, someone stole 69 million accounts off it and tried to sell them for Bitcoin. When Adobe finally switched off Flash at the end of 2020, big parts of the site just stopped working, and some of them never came back. And yet around 300,000 people still log in every month. Most of them are adults now. The biggest single group is between 25 and 34. So this is a story about a website built to sell things to children, and what happened when those children grew up and turned out to be the only people who wanted to keep it running. It starts with 2 people who weren't trying to build anything important. Adam Powell and Donna Williams had known each other since school in Surrey. By the late 90s, they were both at the University of Nottingham, and Powell had been turning over an idea since about 1997, a website where you looked after a virtual pet. Not a Tamagotchi exactly. Something bigger and stranger with a whole world around it. They had real pets between them, birds, guinea pigs, and by most accounts a fairly unpleasant cat. The logic of the idea was simple enough. Give someone an animal to look after, and they'll come back tomorrow to check on it. And if they come back tomorrow, they'll see your ads. That was the business plan. Powell later described the goal as keeping university students entertained and maybe making a bit of money from banner advertising. They started building it properly in September 1999. Powell wrote the code and handled the database. Williams did the art and the design. A couple of friends helped out. On the 15th of November, they put it online from an office in Guildford. It looked homemade because it was. The early creatures were rough, and at least one of them was reportedly a photo of the TV presenter Bruce Forsyth with some Photoshop done to it. Which means there are pets in Neopets today whose family tree, if you follow it back far enough, ends at a game show host. Then, it started growing in a way neither of them had planned for. Somebody posted a link on a pet message board, and the traffic doubled. The following week, it doubled again. It kept doing that. By Christmas, about 6 weeks after launch, Neopets was serving 600,000 page views a day. That's a good problem to have, and also just a problem. Page views cost money. Servers cost money. Bandwidth costs money. And banner ads on a site full of 11-year-olds who weren't buying anything didn't come close to covering it. They were 2 students with a hit website and no way to pay for it, so they went looking for money. They found Doug Doring. He ran a market research company in California. He'd seen what the site was doing, and he understood something about it that the founders hadn't really thought about. They had built a place where children showed up voluntarily, stayed for hours, and came back every single day because they felt responsible for something. From an advertising point of view, that's close to the most valuable thing you can own. Doring invested in late 1999. By January 2000, he and his co-investors had bought a majority of the company, and in February it was incorporated as Neopets. Inquiries Powell and Williams stayed on. They kept making the thing they'd made, but the decisions about what Neopets was actually for had moved somewhere else, into an office they weren't in, and the person making them had ideas about children and advertising that they didn't yet know about. There's a part of this story that gets either overstated or skipped entirely, so I want to go slowly with it. Doug Doring was a member of the Church of Scientology. When he took over Neopets, he ran the company using something called the Org Board, an organizational structure developed by L. Ron Hubbard and used inside Scientology's own institutions. Reporting from the time indicates that 4 of the 6 executives were also members. He also wanted to put Scientology literature on the site. Powell and Williams, who weren't members, and who by their own account only worked out the connection about 6 months in, said no. And as far as anyone has been able to establish, it never happened. So Neopets wasn't a recruitment front. That version turns up a lot, and it isn't supported by anything. What was actually going on is less dramatic and, I think, quite a bit more interesting. The influence wasn't religious, it was structural. Doring took a set of ideas about how you organize people and how you move them through tiers of engagement, and he pointed all of it at an audience whose median age was about 14. What he built out of that is the reason we're still talking about Neopets 25 years later. He called it immersive advertising, and he trademarked the term. The idea was that ads shouldn't look like ads. On most of the internet in 2001, you got a banner across the top of the page, and everyone had already learned to ignore it. Doring's version put the advertising inside the thing you came for. A cereal brand didn't buy a banner, it got a game, a real one, with a scoreboard, that you'd play for 20 minutes because it was actually fun. Cartoon Network didn't get a placement, it got a region of the map. There were branded lands, branded items, surveys dressed up as activities that paid you in Neopoints. At its peak, this was around 60% of the company's revenue, and the client list was Disney, General Mills, McDonald's, the largest advertisers in the world, buying access to a walled garden full of children. And it worked extraordinarily well, because the whole thing ran on a mechanism the founders had built for entirely innocent reasons. Your pet got hungry. If you didn't feed it, it got sad. Feeding it cost Neopoints, and earning Neopoints meant playing games, and a lot of the games were advertisements. The care loop that made the site charming was the same loop that made it profitable. I want to be fair here, because it's easy to make this sound more sinister than it was. Nobody was hiding it exactly. Sociologists wrote about it at the time, the press covered it, and the trade-off it offered, free site, ads baked into the world, is one that most of the modern internet has since accepted without much complaint. Neopets was just unusually early, unusually good at it, and pointed at an unusually young audience. But there's a reason none of this is what people remember. Because while the company was building an advertising machine, the people using it were building something else entirely, and nobody at Neopets Inc. had planned for any of it. They wrote a newspaper. The Neopian Times ran weekly, edited and filled entirely by users, short stories, comics, war reporting on in-game events, and my favorite category, long analytical articles about the Neopian economy. Actual economics, supply and demand of virtual paintbrushes. Kids in the mid-2000s working out inflation on their own, because the developers occasionally flooded the world with Neopoints, and prices went haywire, and somebody had to explain why. They formed guilds, which were part social club and part trade union. They ran a fake stock market. They learned HTML because you could customize your user page with raw markup, which meant a generation of people, mostly girls, mostly teenagers, taught themselves to code so their pet's profile would have a nicer background. And they mapped the parts of the site the company had forgotten about. Neopia was big enough that pages got abandoned. Links went stale. Whole corners stopped being maintained, and players went in and cataloged all of it. They built fan sites to document a world that its owners weren't documenting. That's the tension the rest of this story runs on. The most valuable thing about Neopets was invented in a boardroom. The best thing about it was made for free by the people it was being sold to. The first serious trouble came in October 2004, and it came from Australia. There had been a Poroktabina McDonald's cross-promotion, and a current affairs program called Today Tonight ran a segment about it, along with criticism from child advocacy groups. The charge was that Neopets was effectively teaching children to gamble. That the games paid out so little you had to use the site's casino to earn enough Neopoints to keep your pet fed. Neopets disputed it. It's genuinely arguable how forced the gambling was, and plenty of players managed fine without it. But the company's actual response tells you something. They restricted access to the casino games for anyone under 13. You generally don't do that if the answer is no. By then, though, the numbers had become difficult to argue with. In May 2005, Neopets had 35 million unique users, 4 billion page views a month. It was ranked repeatedly among the stickiest sites on the entire internet. Not the most visited, but the one people stayed on longest, measured in hours per person per month, sitting alongside properties owned by companies 1,000 times its size. A site 2 students had built in Guildford 6 years earlier was now one of the most engaging places on the web. On the 20th of June 2005, Viacom bought it for $160 million. Powell and Williams left not long after the sale, over what everyone involved has politely described as creative differences. They'd built the thing, watched someone else decide what it was for, and now that person had sold it to a television company. They later married, which is the happiest fact in this entire video, so I'm putting it here while I can. Viacom, for its part, had bought Neopets specifically because of the advertising model. And then it spent the next few years moving the site toward conventional banner ads, away from the exact thing it had paid $160 million for. Neopets was folded into Nickelodeon, and then into something called the Nickelodeon Kids and Family Virtual Worlds Group, which is the kind of name a website gets shortly before nobody senior thinks about it again. Some of what followed was genuinely good. In 2006, they launched the Altador Cup, a site-wide football tournament where you picked a region and played for it, and 10.4 million people took part in the first year alone. That's not a dying website. That's one of the largest organized events on the internet at the time. But two things happened in 2007 that mattered more, and only one of them looked important at the time. The first was in April. Neopets rolled out a site-wide redesign, new artwork for every pet, and a customization system so you could dress them. Most players updated. A small number, for various reasons, never did, and their pets kept the old artwork permanently. There was no way to get it afterwards. The art style simply stopped being available. Nobody thought much of it. Remember it anyway. The second was in July, when Neopets opened the NC Mall. Neocash was a second currency that you bought with actual money, running in parallel to the Neopoints you earned by playing. It's ordinary now. Every free game on Earth works this way. In 2007, on a site whose entire internal logic was that effort earned you things, it was a real change to what Neopia was. And underneath all of it, the audience was leaving, not dramatically. Nielsen measured a 15% drop across 2007. It kept going. Facebook games were arriving, phones were arriving, and Neopets was a website you sat at a desktop computer to visit, built in Flash, run by people whose job titles had the word virtual worlds in them. In June 2011, the site passed 1 trillion cumulative page views, which sounds like a triumph and was really more of a receipt. Most of that had been earned years earlier. In March 2014, Viacom sold Neopets to Jumpstart Games. This is where the site starts visibly rotting, and I want to be precise about what that looked like, because it wasn't a shutdown. It was worse than a shutdown in some ways. It was neglect. A server migration that September introduced glitches and lag that never entirely went away. In March 2015, Jumpstart laid off most of the remaining staff who'd come over from the Viacom era, the people who actually knew how the thing worked. The chief executive, David Lord, went out publicly to reassure everyone that the site wasn't closing, which is the sort of statement that only ever gets made when people have started asking. Then in June 2015, the chat filter broke. For 2 days, the message boards of a website for children filled up with content that absolutely should not have been there. The company's explanation was that they'd been moving offices, and the moderators couldn't get access. Whatever the cause, that's what happens when you fire the people who know where everything is. In May 2016 came the first big breach, around 70 million accounts, though the data itself dated from 2012 and had apparently been out there for years. Usernames, passwords, email addresses, birth dates. By January 2017, David Lord put the site at roughly 100,000 daily active users. 12 years earlier, it had 35 million uniques. That's the shape of the whole decade in one comparison. Later that year, Neopets was sold again, this time to a Chinese gaming company called NetDragon. And then Flash died. Adobe had been telling everyone for years. Flash was insecure, it was a battery furnace, it didn't work on phones, and it would be switched off at the end of 2020. The date was announced in 2017. Nobody could say they hadn't been warned. Neopets ran on Flash. Not partially. The games ran on Flash, over 100 of them. And the games were how you earned Neopoints. And Neopoints were how you fed your pet, bought items, and participated in the economy. Flash wasn't a feature of Neopets. It was the engine underneath the entire thing. They announced a conversion to HTML5 to be finished by the end of 2020. It was not finished by the end of 2020. So in December, the games stopped. All of them at once. The economy lost its source of income. Entire sections of the world became unreachable. Not deleted exactly, just permanently unavailable. Like a building where the lifts have been switched off and the upper floors are technically still there. And people stayed. That's the part I keep coming back to. Hundreds of thousands of adults kept logging into a website where most of the things you could do had stopped working because it was still theirs. Then the theft started. Remember April 2007 and the pets that never got converted to the new art style? By 2021, those were the rarest objects in Neopia. They couldn't be created, they couldn't be replaced, and there was a limited and permanently shrinking supply of them, which meant they were worth real money. Hundreds of dollars, changing hands outside the site entirely, in private trades the company had no visibility into. You can guess what happened next. People started stealing them, and the conditions were about as favorable as they could possibly be, because the site's security was creaking, and it was carrying 2 decades of dormant accounts that nobody had ever purged, belonging to people who'd stopped playing in 2006, and would never notice. Stolen pets got moved through chains of accounts to launder them. Staff, working with the tools they had, resorted to reversing trades, which sometimes meant unwinding hundreds of transactions at once, including ones made by people who'd done nothing wrong. There was no good answer. There was barely a staff. And that's roughly where the owners decided the problem was that Neopets didn't have enough blockchain in it. On the 22nd of September 2021, they announced Neopets Metaverse, a 3D remake of Neopia, and to take part in it, you would need to own an NFT. 20,000 of them were minted, 4,225 sold. The community response was not mixed. People had spent a year watching the site they loved sit half-broken while nobody fixed the games, and the announcement said in effect that the plan was to sell it back to them in pieces. And then players started looking closely at the promotional artwork, which is where it stops being a bad business decision and starts being something else. There's a fan-made tool called Dress to Impress. It's a dress-up simulator, built and maintained by players, free, unofficial, which lets you preview outfits on your pets without buying anything. It has been a fixture of the community for years. Someone noticed that one of the pets in the official NFT promotional images, a dimensional Kugra, had green spots where it should have had a blue outline. That specific wrong coloring wasn't something Neopets.com could produce. It was a known rendering glitch in the pre-2020 version of Dress to Impress, which meant the artwork promoting the official commercial NFT project had been generated using a free fan-made tool. The image was quietly swapped out for a different pet. No acknowledgement was made. No apology was issued. When asked later, the project manager declined to comment, and the team noted that several of the original members had already left. The project was, at that point, essentially finished. It limped on for another 1.5 years before being formally canceled. And then, on the 20th of July, 2022, Neopets announced it had been breached. 69 million accounts. Email addresses, dates of birth, gender, country, and hashed passwords. The attacker had been inside the company's systems for roughly 18 months before anyone noticed, and the data was reportedly offered for sale for the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars in Bitcoin. Neopets forced a password reset on everyone, which was the correct thing to do, and which created a problem nobody seems to have anticipated. To reset your password, you needed access to the email address you'd registered with. A very large number of these accounts had been made by children in 2001, using an email address that no longer existed, a school account, a parent's old provider, a Hotmail address abandoned 2 decades ago. Those people could see their pets on the login screen and could not get in. There are forum threads from that period of adults trying to prove they were the same person who'd made an account at 9 years old, so they could get back to a shoiru they'd raised in primary school. 11 months later, in June 2023, Jumpstart announced it was closing down. The obvious ending to the story is that Neopets goes dark in 2023. The servers get switched off, and a few thousand people who'd been holding on since childhood get a farewell post and a screenshot. That's how nearly every version of the story goes. Club Penguin, Toontown, Habbo, pick your childhood website, it's usually the same last chapter. That isn't what happened. There was a man inside NetDragon called Dominic Law who had been working on getting Neopets out for about 3 years. On the 17th of July 2023, a management buyout completed. Neopets became an independent company, World of Neopia, owned by the people running it, for the first time since Doug Doring took control in January 2000. The first thing they did was cancel the NFT project. The second thing is the part I find genuinely remarkable, and small enough that it's easy to skip past. For 3 years, the Flash games had been gone, and the official answer had always been a full rebuild in HTML5. Expensive, slow, and never finished by any of the owners who'd promised it. Meanwhile, players had been pointing at something called Ruffle. It's an open-source Flash emulator made by volunteers that runs old Flash content in a modern browser. Players had been saying, just use Ruffle in forum threads and support tickets for years, to no one in particular. The new company used Ruffle. The games came back. Site visits jumped by around 40% over the following months. A catastrophe that 4 different corporate owners had failed to solve was fixed essentially by listening to the people who'd stayed. By April 2024, monthly active users had tripled from about 100,000 to about 300,000. In 2023, the site had its best revenue since 2017. Law has said publicly that he wants Neopets to last another 25 years. And by the company's own account, it's now roughly breaking even after more than a decade of losses. I should say that not everything since has worked. A compilation of minigames released in March 2026 was received poorly, by which I mean people did not like it at all. This is not a story where a plucky team takes over and everything is fine. It's a story where a website that should be dead is, instead, slightly profitable and occasionally disappointing, which is a much more realistic kind of survival. Which brings me back to the number from the beginning. Around 40% of Neopets users today are between 25 and 34. Another 26% are between 18 and 24. The overwhelming majority of the people on that site are adults. Doug Doring built an advertising machine aimed at an audience whose median age was 14. He built it well. Well enough that it was worth $160 million. Well enough that Disney and McDonald's queued up for it. Well enough that the technique got a trademark. Those 14-year-olds are in their late 30s now, and they are the entire reason the site still exists. They're the ones who kept logging in when the games didn't work. They're the ones who documented the parts of the world the owners had forgotten. They're the ones who wrote the newspaper, mapped the abandoned pages, spent a decade telling 4 separate corporate owners about an emulator that would fix everything, and were eventually right. 5 different companies wanted 5 different things out of Neopets. A business, an advertising laboratory, a television property, an asset to hold, a crypto play. Every one of them treated it as a means to something else, and every one of them is gone. The only group that ever wanted Neopets to simply keep existing was the group being sold to. And it turns out that was the only thing that was ever going to keep it alive.